Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. And today, I have found another lovely lecture by Neville Goddard. This one's called Love Divided from Imagination. And here we get a beautiful explanation of the differences between love and imagination. In previous lectures, Neville has spoken about love as an actual living energy, a living being that he has met. And we have learned more and more about this aspect of love that Neville talks about in the ways that it empowers our imagination. But there is a difference between imagination and love, and in this, he explains that with so much more. Love Divided from Imagination by Neville Goddard, October 27th, 1967. I think you'll find this a very practical evening, and yet profoundly spiritual. All things exist in the human imagination, and I mean that literally. None can know of imagination who has not tasted the cup of experience. Shall I not drink of the cup which the Father has given me? And here we read in the Psalms that there is in the hand of the Lord a cup that is bubbling over with wine and very well mixed. I will take the cup of the Lord of salvation and call upon his name. Psalms 75:8. We read these words and we wonder, now, what is it all about? Well, let me share with you a vision of mine of about 30 years ago. This night I found myself in an infinite field of beautiful flowers. They were sunflowers as far as the eye could see, and every flower was a human face, and each perfect. If one smiled, all smiled. If one bent over, all bent over. No matter what one did, all did it. As I stood there observing this fantastic display of beauty, I knew, although I did not feel myself, that beautiful not by the widest stretch of my imagination. I also knew that I was freer, that I expressed a greater measure of liberty and freedom than all of them put together. I knew it. When I returned to my body on the bed, I knew that in some strange way I was separated from that which once I formed a part. And then these words from the 8th chapter of Romans: we were made subject unto futility, not by our own will, but by the will of him who subjected us, in hope that we would be set free from this bondage to decay and obtain the glorious liberty of the sons of God. Romans 8:20. And so, you and I here in this world are detached from that field of beauty. It's a chorus where they all move in unison. But you and I are now separated. And here we are in this world, completely separated, completely incarnated. And complete incarnation is essential to individuality. This incarnation involves separation from the Father. It involves death. It involves, descent into hell. This is hell. You may not know it, but this is hell, where we are now, right here, in this room, and in this world. In this world, we are separated from the Father. You may not know, but there is a fear in the heart of man that he never more will see his Father, who from all eternity was built into himself. It's a fear, but may I assure you, having seen the Father, having realized the Father, that your fear might not be continued if you believe me. You'll find the Father, and when you find him, you'll find him as yourself. We are separated from the Father for a divine purpose. For without this complete incarnation, insulated in this garment of flesh and blood. I would never find him. I would be part of that infinite chorus of beauty. I can't describe the beauty of the faces. Like sunflowers, each a perfectly marvelous, beautiful human face. If one smiled, all smiled. If one bent over, all bent over. No matter what one did, all did it. It was a chorus, but now you and I are not a chorus anymore. We are individualized forever and forever. And may I tell you, we not only are individualized, but we tend forever toward greater and greater individualization. That is who we are. By actually being subjected to this world, where we are completely incarnated. And here we stand today. Now, what is the purpose of it here? I am incarnated. You and I are incarnated. Why? To create in ourselves the Spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin. Believe me when I tell you, I know from experience that God is love. I stood in the presence of the risen Christ, infinite love, and he embraced me. But do you know that love divided from imagination is eternal death? I'll show you why. I love a friend, and my friend is unemployed, without funds, burdened beyond measure. I can't deny I love him. My memory tells me whenever I think of him, he is unemployed, he is without funds, and he's burdened. I will keep him forever through love in that state unless I know what imagination is all about. So, none will know imagination who has not tasted this cup of experience. We come into the world, and there we are. And we spend centuries. Oh yes, we love. You love your wife. You love your mother, father, children, friends. But you don't know how to change them from what they are into what they ought to be unless you drink this cup of experience. And you know the great secret of imagining. So love divided from imagination is eternal death. Now I'll tell you what imagination is. God's great gift. His creative power of himself to man. That God is love. Yes, God is infinite power, infinite wisdom. But his creative power is imagination. Now he gives me his creative power, called in Scripture Jesus Christ. In the first chapter of Paul's letters to Corinthians, and Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. 1 Corinthians 1:24. So I see one that I love him dearly, and he's, as I said, unemployed, without funds, in great need, embarrassed and unclothed. I still love him. But now, let me take my gift that God gave me and exercise it and represent him to myself as I would like him to be, gainfully employed, happy, no debts. Let me persist in that imaginative state concerning my friend. And if he now conforms to it, if the world now remolds itself and shapes him in the likeness of one who is gainfully employed, who is making all that it takes, has no debts, then I have found the most wonderful secret. This is the story of the prodigal son. So there were two sons, and the second one said, "Give me what is mine. Let me go into the world." So he went into the world, and he simply lost or wasted all. The first one did not leave home. When the second one came back, having had experience, he said, when he came to himself, he remembered his father. And then he went back, and his father gave him the robe, the ring, and prepared the fatted calf for a tremendous merry reception in the honor of the returned son. The first one complained, and he said to the first one who complained, he said, "Son, you are always with me. You've never departed. You've never detached from this world. You're always here. And all that is mine is yours." Luke 15:11-32. But he knew nothing of the power of imagination. All was his, but he didn't know how to appropriate it. You tonight could have $1 billion in the bank and die of starvation if you didn't know you had $1 billion in the bank. If it is all yours, but you didn't know, you would never appropriate 1 penny in the world and die of starvation. Die dishonored. So all mine is yours. That's what he said to the son. But you're always with me. You've never gone out. You never departed from the Father. You and I departed from the Father. We came out. We did not do it willingly, not by our own will, but by the will of Him, He who subjected us to this world of futility in hope that we would become free and set free from this world of decay. For everything dies here. It dies, decays, and obtain the glorious liberty of the sons of God to exercise this power of imagination. Romans 8:20. So here, we are in this world, and now we must exercise this right. Now, after he tells this story, he follows through with the story of the unjust steward. These are the 15th and 16th chapters of the book of Luke. So he tells the story. These are parables, and parables are wonderful stories, where man must discover the fictitious nature of parable and extract its meaning and apply it. Now he comes into, right on the heels of it, he tells the story of this wonderful unjust steward, and he commends him for what he did. Now the original meaning of the word steward was the keeper of the pig. That's what it means, a steward. Today we think of a chief steward on a ship. A steward takes care of things belonging to another, but originally the word meant the keeper of the pig, and the pig universally is the symbol of the Savior of the world. That is a universal symbol, the pig. To keep the pig, I tell you my story. Will you eat it? No, there are hundreds of millions who will not eat a pig today. They will not accept the story. They will not accept this story of salvation, so they refuse the pig as food. Unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you have no life in you. John 6:53. So it's not a little pig, like eating a piece of roast pork, which is a delightful thing. It's well done. And so who doesn't like it, the taste of it? But there are those who will not eat it, in a most literal sense, meaning they will not accept the story of salvation. They will not take it. So here, he is the keeper of the pig, the steward, the unjust steward. He was called to give an account because it was rumored that he was not keeping a proper record. Then the one who employed him said to him, "I have heard these things concerning you, and now bringing an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer work for me." Well, knowing this, he went to those who were debtors of his employer, and he said, "How much do you owe my master?" He said, 100 measures of oil. He said, "Sit down and quickly and write 50. How much do you owe?" 100 measures of wheat. He said, "Sit and write 80. We went through the entire list, and the master, when he heard of this, highly commended him for his action. Well, you couldn't conceive of someone commending a dishonest employee for such an action. So what does it mean? It's a parable. Now, who is keeping the record in me, in you? My memory, that's the recorder. I know what I saw today, what I heard, what the mail brought. So someone called me and told me that they were well distressed. So when I hang up, I know what they said. That is the recording being in me. I am called upon to falsify the record. I heard what I heard, but I mustn't live with that. At the end of the day, when night falls, I'm given upon to give an account of my day. Have I falsified the record? I must learn to falsify the record of the day. So someone is now distressed in some marital state. Am I going to let the curtain fall this night without revising the record? I am told to sit down quickly and write instead of 100. This is a fact. Write 50. I modify it. I'm not saying that they will now be completely enamored as they were. the record the day they got married. I'm not saying that they will. He falsified it 50%. He falsified it 20%, but he falsifies the record. In other words, he makes an adjustment. He can't bring himself to completely bring them back 30 years to the day when they got married. And then they go through life in that romance. Can't do that. He's not qualified to do that. He's not strong enough to do that, but he can falsify it. He brings them down 50%, brings them down 20%. So here, in this fabulous world of ours, we're living, we falsify the record. So all things exist in the human imagination, and you and I are detached. I see it so clearly after 30 odd years. I can see that scene right now, see it more vividly than I can the lovely flowers that my earthly mother grew. Mother was passionately fond of her garden, a beautiful garden. Every day Mother would go out, always had her parasol, because she was very, very fair and the sun would blister her. So under her parasol and to her gardeners, she gave the little directions as to what they should do. I can't see her grafting her lovely roses and doing all these lovely things. Beautiful garden. She was unusually fond of flowers. I can see her, but this vision that I had transcends anything in my childhood in Mother's lovely garden. Every face is so distinct, and they were all like a chorus. They moved in the most perfect manner. One moved, all moved in the same direction. No one violated the order, the unseen or unheard order. And if one smiled, all smiled. As I stood observing them, I realized I was freer. Single as I was, observing it all by just one being, I was completely free. If not completely free, certainly more free than all of them put together. And then I realized that this division that must take place when we were made subject unto futility not only separates us from the Father and involves death, for we die, and brings us into the world of hell, a descent into hell. Yet oddly, it creates in us the Spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin. And in hell, which is here, there is nothing but self-justification. He shot me first. She shot me first. She did so and so. So I justify everything that happens in my world. This is the voice of hell, self-justification. But in heaven, it's all forgiveness of sin, because all things exist in the human imagination. So something is happening in my world. It can't be happening outside of something that is taking place in me. So I must forgive it by changing it in me. I can't just justify it in any way, but I can't condemn it, for I will live in a state of hell, for everything is taking place in you. You are now separated from the Father, but may I tell you, don't despair that you never more would see him, for he is built in from all eternity in you, and you will meet him. You'll meet him when David stands before you and you know him as your son. He will actually stand before you and you will call him son. He'll call you Father, Adonai, my Lord. It's not a David, it is the David, the eternal David that was set up in the beginning of time, that was actually put into the mind of man before that the world was. And then you and I were simply detached. It was simply an act of love. Though it doesn't seem that way when you and I were detached from that infinite field of beauty and then made subject unto futility, not by our own will, but by the will of him who subjected us, who intended to give himself to us to do it. We had to be individualized. So complete incarnation, where I'm insulated. I'm completely incarnated and think myself Neville and think myself a member of a family. But I am not the family. I'm a member of the family of many brothers, a sister, and I have friends, and I have a wife, and I have children. But I am insulated, completely separated, and this complete incarnation was essential to my own individuality, that I would then begin to awake. And waking, I am he who subjected me. I become the very being the world calls God the Father. So this is the great story as I understand it from my own personal experience and my visions. And then I paralleled it with the words of Scripture. So tonight, I'm asking you to take your own wonderful human imagination and exercise it. Bring not only your friends, bring yourself, because they're all yourself anyway. Take everyone and put them into the light that is a more glorious light than where you found them. Don't say, well, it serves them right. You're justifying it because all things exist in you. It's not out there. It's all in you. So if you fail 1,000 times, and how long, how often, Lord? 70 times 7. Shall I not drink the cup which the Father has given me? Well, how often must I forgive my brother who sins against me? Well, may I tell you in the 51st Psalm, the 4th verse, you can't say it's sinning in any other way than this: against thee, O Lord, thee only have I sinned, and done that which is evil in thy sight. Therefore thy judgment, thy justification is in order. You've judged me? Well, who is this being against whom I've sinned? His name is I Am. All right, his name is I Am. Against thee, the only, have I sinned, and done that which is evil in thy sight. All right. I see someone in my world and it's not right. Well, I can't sin against another. It's against myself. I'm seeing it. I am seeing it. So I've got to take that and represent it to myself as it ought to be seen, and persist in the scene until it conforms to what I'm seeing. That is what I'm called upon to do. Against thee, thee only, have I sinned and done that which is evil in thy sight. So if I encounter anything, and I will encounter everything in this world, I've got to change it if it needs to be changed. I was made subject unto this futility, unto this vanity. And I alone in the world in which I live, I've got to change it and live in the sense as though things were as I desire them to be. I know this from experience, because the night that I was lifted up in 1946 and came upon this infinite sea of human imperfection, when I was lifted up, all were made perfect in harmony with that state to which I was lifted as I walked by. So within ourselves, we must lift ourselves to the state where we can lift our world up. Because everything in this world is yourself pushed out. It's all yourself made visible. There is nothing but you. But not a thing in this world, no matter what it is, it's all you made visible. The whole vast world is God projected, and God's name is I Am. So here, believe me when I tell you of my visions. They have never betrayed me. Never. I might have betrayed my vision by ignoring it and encountering someone in need, not accepting what the vision is telling me to do. But it's telling me that when I encounter anyone in my world, to know I am only encountering myself. It can't be another. Then I start it, and I represent that seeming other to myself as I would like him to be. To the degree that I persist in the assumption, then the other conforms to that state. So here I must dream. And I think I can say tonight, I drank that cup to the very dregs. Shall I not take the cup which is the Father has given me? For in the Lord's hand there's a cup with foaming wine all mixed. Yes, I did not avoid any character in the world. I played them all. Played all the characters, the white, the black, the yellow, the pink, the red, whatever color there was, I played it. When he was honored or dishonored, I played it. I played all the characters of the world, and that I do know. So I can say Everyone in the world is playing all the characters. If you haven't played them, you're going to. But let me assure you, because you are here, and no man comes unto me except my Father calls him. You are here, and I have reached the end of the road, and I have called you because my Father in me has called you. You play the parts too. You play them all. Start now to take every being in your world and change them into the form of love. But love divided from imagination is eternal death. Yes, you can love someone dearly, love them forever, but you can keep them in that state forever, not knowing they're in a state and only a state. So take them out by the use of imagination. But none will know imagination who has not tasted the cup of experience. So here, we are in this world of experience for a divine purpose. It is the world of hell. This is hell. It's the world of death. This is death. But now you take it right here and overcome the last enemy in the world, which is death. So someone seems to be forever ignored. Forget it. You in your mind's eye represent him as one who is known and wanted and loved, and see him conform to that. Bring him out of that state. Bring them all out of the state. You will say, well, what is going to happen to me? That's yourself. You're saving yourself. So don't be concerned. What's going to happen to me? May I tell you, things happen. It's all yours. He said to the first son, all mine is yours. But the son didn't know. He wasn't detached. He wasn't separated from the Father. So he couldn't appropriate, not even a little kid. He said, he never once gave me a kid that I could have a feast with my friends. But he said, son, all that is mine is yours. The son didn't know it. But here, your brother, he was dead, for separation from God is death. And he's alive. He was lost and he's found. So the seed had to be detached from the Father, fall into the ground to be made alive. For a seed, unless it falls into the ground, then it remains alone. But if it falls into the ground and dies, then it brings forth much. John 12:24. So the seed, which is the creative power of God, your own wonderful human imagination, falls into the ground in you. This body is the red earth, called Adam, and then it is made alive. Suddenly he begins to awake, and he realizes who he really is. He encounters infinite love, but without the power of imagination, and divided from imagination, love itself is eternal death. So here we go through this fabulous world of ours, changing our world to conform, yes, to a loving thing, but you can't change it without imagination, and you can imagine, everyone can imagine. So let the world go, let them go by, don't try in any way. Your world, speaking of your world and changing your world, and prove this power within you. Then you will know what it is to drink the cup which the Father has given you. Shall I not drink it to the very end? I would. May I tell you, I have. But it was God's infinite love when he detached me from himself and allowed me to drop, as it were. For this separation from God is a form, and yet it's a beginning of a new creation. So I fall as the seed falls from man, and yet it is the beginning of a new creation. And so here we fell, and then began a new creation, and God in us has given himself in this wonderful human imagination. So tonight, you take it. You take yourself, begin with self. You're told to begin with Jerusalem. Now who am I? Where am I? What am I? Well, I don't like it. All right, let me begin right there. Then represent myself to myself as the man, as the woman I would like to be, and persist in this assumption. The assumption, though, at the moment is denied by my senses, denied by reason. If I persist in it, it will harden into fact. So this is what we're called upon to do. And this is simply taking the gift of God. He dropped me. What good would I be if I were dropped without the gift of His creative power, called in Scripture Jesus Christ? He's the power of God and the wisdom of God. So I can be dropped. He dropped me in love, for He's all love, but He dropped me. And in me, He buried His creative power. And then I come out and I see things, and I don't like them. But I don't know how to change them. Finally, I go through all of the things of the world, and then I discover I can change it. I try it. I try it once, try it twice, try it a dozen times, and it works. Then I know I can change it. But when I know I can change the world, that I don't have to argue with the world, I can change it to conform to the ideal that is in my being, well, then I do it. And so believe me, I've experienced it. I can see that enormous field of perfection. You've never seen such beautiful faces, like sunflowers, each flower a face, and yet a chorus. It was only a chorus. But you are not a chorus, you are a soloist. You are individualized, and only complete incarnation can individualize us. So I had to be completely incarnated and isolated, feel myself separated from everything, including my earthly mother, loving her as much as I do, and my father, and my brothers, and my sister, my wife, and my children. I went into something entirely different, completely isolated. This complete incarnation is essential to my individuality, yet it involves separation from the Father, involves death, and descent into hell. Though I'm seeking for the source of all phenomenon, what is causing it? Which is the Father? And I despair, and I'm afraid I will never find my Father, my source of phenomenon, who from all eternity was built into me. And then one day I am born from above, and 5 months later, I encounter the only one in eternity that could reveal to me who I am. He stands before me, and here is David. And David calls me Father. Then I know, no doubts, no uncertainty. I am looking right into the eyes of the one who was in the beginning put into my mind. He put eternity into the mind of man, yet so that man could not find out what God had done from the beginning until the end. Ecclesiastes 3:11. So the end comes, and then he stands before you and he calls you Father, then you know. So I say to everyone, you are detached and subjected unto futility. But may I tell you, it is for a divine purpose. The purpose is that you will obtain the glorious liberty of the sons of God. And the sons of God are resurrected, as you are told that they are sons of the resurrection, being sons of God, or they're sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. Luke 20:36. It's automatic. You can't be a son of God until you are resurrected, born from above. Then you encounter the great David, who stands before you and calls you Father. But here, you are here, and no one could come unless the Father within me called him. But no one, may I tell you, and we are waking quickly, rapidly in this small gathering. When I think in this audience tonight, I can see those who have awakened, who found David. One has found the child on the 6th of March, or approximately about that time he has to find David. David must come to him. If that chronological order that Bob and I followed is the order, and I'm convinced that it is, then Benny must on the 6th, or approximately the 6th of March, bring forth David. Others have the forecasting of it. Many of you have from your letters. So I say in the not distant future, then the actual thing will take place. And then comes the fulfillment. I can't tell you my thrill without any feeling of emptiness or despair, because as far as I'm concerned, I could just drop right now. It would make no difference to me, none whatsoever. I feel my work is done. But for unknown reasons, I must continue to tell it over and over and over. That will be told me afterwards, why I still must continue after the work is done, for my work is finished. I've completed it, all of the scripture I have experienced. Yet I am called upon to remain and tell it. But whenever that moment in time comes that I depart, it makes no difference whatsoever, only it's a thrill to me in this world, which is called hell, to see that we are overcoming the last enemy, which is death. For death is the last enemy to be overcome, and to find in this audience people are overcoming it over and over. It is marvelous. Now let us go into the silence. This lecture doesn't have any questions, so it is another wonderful lecture, and he really explains the process of awakening, and again comes back to this repeated suggestion that David is going to call all of us Father. And once again, I'd love to know who has had this vision. Please tell me. I want to know how many people have had the vision of David calling you Father. My question, with a lot of the stuff that Neville talks about, we know from the Frank Carter lectures that Neville Goddard would read the Bible 8 hours a day and had multiple different translations memorized. So this man, and you get more of what you focus on, this man had memorized the Bible. Is it no surprise that he dreamed stuff that was happening in the Bible because he was so immersed in it? Are these visions and dreams that Neville had a result of his obsession with the Bible and not real? That is for you and I to decide. And the best way for us to determine this is not just talk by Neville, is if other people have had this vision of David. I'm going to read the Law and the Promise soon, but I'm asking this as a call out to anybody that's listening to this episode. Have you had the vision of David calling you Father, or has anybody else heard of this? So I want to know. That's a question that we all have. Neville's teachings on the imagination creating reality are fantastic, and his teachings on the promise are very interesting and exciting, and they resonate, and I can feel it, and they mean a lot to me, having an understanding of the Bible. But there needs to be more direct confirmation. If this only happened to him, then this was in his own wonderful human imagination, which is fine. But is it something that we all go through? Or was that just something he was imagining because of his literal obsession with the Bible? He started to see biblical dreams. Well, of course he did, with such a deep, deep understanding of the Bible. So my question is, how do we separate this? How do we know what Neville is dreaming and saying is real? He's saying, he's not theorizing, that he experienced all this stuff. And I believe him. I believe when Neville says that. But it would seem to be more of a confirmation if we've seen other people claim that they've had David in a dream or whatever type of vision say, call you Father. So I'm asking for that. Other than this, we get an understanding that of the incorporation with love and death. And we go back to the common theme that we were separated like a seed. And this vision and this visual is really beautiful, of us being seeds planted in the ground. And we awaken from this knowledge that was planted in us, that God is in us like a seed. And I love that. That's a really easy thing for me to understand and grasp. And then we get Neville saying that hell is earth now. That's something that I was taught by my mother, who was a believer, that we are living in hell now. We certainly live in a world that can become hell by our own very imagining. I believe that. We are living nightmares. And now once you awaken and realize that a lot of your nightmares that you're living now is purely a result of your own thoughts and your own imagination, and then you can change it. That to me is a real thing. Yes, this world can be a hell, and it is a hell for those who have not awoken. But once you awaken and you realize your power, it is a heaven beyond anything that you or I can begin to imagine. So, another wonderful lecture. These new lectures from 1963 through 67, I'm very fascinated by, but I have a question for all of you, especially people that are huge Neville fans. I've been getting inquiries on Messenger on Facebook, and I had the same thought. These lectures I've been reading, they all sound consistent with Neville. We know how he talks, but I promise you, I had never heard of these lectures, and I'm a huge Neville fan, and I had read all of his lectures. And so I wanted to know, had you heard all these lectures? Because it feels like a Mandela effect of some kind, like these lectures popped up out of nowhere. So I've had multiple people now, 2 people, message me about the same thing. Like, they are huge Neville fans. They will sit and listen to Neville lectures 8 hours a day, and they had never heard of these lectures that had come out. And I want to know if you had heard about these lectures. It's very interesting to me. I did some research, and there is a old posting for a GoFundMe page for Freedom Barry saying he had a bunch of tapes of some additional lost lectures of Neville Goddard. So is there even more lectures that we don't know about? I want to know that now. It's a question I asked 2020. I'm going to bring 2020 on and ask some questions about this stuff. Hopefully you got a chance to listen to the Frank Carter lecture that I had to take down because that particular lecture is copyrighted. But we can still discuss it. And that lecture talks about Neville's death and how he is talked about in the Bible. And that still is resonating with me because I had heard a completely different story about his death. So it feels like maybe with one of my quantum jumps that I really did quantum jump. And a way to tell if you've quantum jump is through Neville Goddard, because I'm seeing things and postings and things about Neville Goddard I had never seen. So anyway, that's just a diatribe and it's not important. I hope you got something out of this lecture. Please comment, put a like on this so that other people can get access to this. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution. Welcome to The Reality Revolution. Unlimited possibilities. Dedicated to the spirits who believe life is meant to be magical. Get out, yes, some really good meditations, and you discuss. It contains advanced viewpoints of the multidimensional human beings of the 21st century. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Sometimes you need to go back. We were able to visualize with exploring stuff that's fun to explore. I can tell. Unleash your potential. Some topics on how to change the subconscious mind and some I'm your host, Brian Scott.